I'm the CEO of Applied DNA Sciences. We are a public company that uses DNA derived from botanical sources and engineered to make individual marks. And we utilize those marks to prevent counterfeiting and to aid in law enforcement. Now, our market is uncannily large. By some, it's been estimated to be 10 to 15% of global trade, a number almost too large to fathom. But the International Chamber of Commerce has estimated for the coming year the global counterfeiting economy, and it certainly deserves that title, will reach $1.7 trillion and take from America at least 2.5 million jobs. So in terms of the market that we serve, it essentially has no limit. And we, as a young, small company, have to be cautious about the industry verticals we pursue. Here are just some quick facts. We consider ourselves a biotech company. Our call letters are APDN. We're headquartered at Stony Brook on Long Island in a 30,000 square foot state-of-the-art DNA detection and production facility. We also have facilities in the north of England and Huddersfield. Both are associated with universities. The Long Island one at Stony Brook, and in Huddersfield with the University of Huddersfield and Leeds. We're staffed at about 50 people. We have a very aggressive intellectual property policy. And our IP is comprised not just of our patents, but also of our trade secrets, which we guard quite closely. So we have about 31 patents pending, 22 filed. Our focus is on getting the DNA where we need to get it to and then retrieving it when the time comes. We're well suited. People were talking about young, aggressive technicians. Long Island really is a corridor of DNA technology from Cold Spring Harbor, where Jim Watson, who discovered the structure of DNA some 60 years ago, is still located and has a terrific population of DNA-informed postdoctoral fellows, to Stony Brook University, where our private facility is, to Brookhaven National Laboratory, where seminal discoveries that contributed to the biotech revolution were made in all three locations. So we have probably the best DNA technical pool to hire from in the United States, bar none. Our value proposition is kind of unique. First of all, our marks cannot be copied, and that's been proved by several federal agencies. They are persistent. No matter how criminals have tried to remove them from marked money, for example, they can't seem to do it. They provide a unique identity. We have an unlimited capacity to make DNA marks. And we can take any single DNA mark and manufacture that in unlimited quantity. We use them to secure supply chain. There is a direct IT connection I'll tell you about in a little while. And DNA is really taken as the gold standard of authenticity in courts across the globe. It's also the most sensitive analyte on the planet. We can literally pick up a single molecule of our DNA marker and detect it with the methods that are well studied, well accepted globally. Our product family is diverse, covers a wide range of opportunity for us. Our basic platform we call Signature DNA, and I'll tell you how we make a Signature DNA marker shortly. Signature T is an activated form of Signature DNA, which targets specific ligands, molecular moieties that might be present on the surface, let's say, of a banknote or of a textile or of a ID card. Fiber typing is a process we use to genotype textiles. For 30 years it's been said that cotton, for example, has no native DNA left in it, but we have been able to uncover DNAs that allow us to actually tell not only what the genus and species of a particular cotton is, but you can begin to infer from SNPs and changes in the DNA, even as down to the farm level as to where this cotton derived from. DNAnet is used to nab criminals in the midst of crimes, and we also use it to mark cash. Digital DNA is an interface between the IT world and the DNA world that offers some unique opportunities for track and trace and for direct communication to a customer. Here are some of our customers. Speaking of customers, you'll see we have federal customers, the Department of Defense, the Defense Logistics Agency. We also have prime contractors, one of whom is listed up there, O3. We have brands like Martin Guitar, one of the finest guitars made in the United States and the oldest guitar made in the United States. Security firms like Brinks and Loomis. And we have cities as customers like Stockholm and London. And we're in a limited number of industrial verticals, and we have done so intentionally because the world is too large in the universe of counterfeits, and so we've had to focus our attention quite carefully. So this is how we make a DNA marker. We start with a botanical genome. Might disappoint you to know that botanical genomes are every bit as large and complicated as yours. About 3 billion base pairs typically. And from that genome, we then slice and dice it and segment it and use opportunities to encrypt content into it. So that you may have read the story of George Church, who recently wrote a book at Harvard, encrypted the entire content of the 1,200 pages of the book into the genome of E. coli, shipped the E. coli to Stanford, where his colleague grew the bug, sequenced the genome, and printed the book from the content stored inside the bacterial DNA. So when you think of a DNA marker, you should be thinking of content, much the way you think of binary code holding the content on your laptop computer. Then we ligate, and that's the end of the biology, but then starts our chemistry. And our chemistry is dedicated to stabilizing DNA, making sure that it will last for many years, in some cases hundreds of years, we think. Stabilizing it against a variety of challenges, and you'll see some of the ones DoD gave to us. Packaging it properly so that we can encapsulate it to get it into something if need be, like an epoxy acrylate, and then get it back out again after it's been polymerized. The authentication is straightforward. We have rapid reading techniques and devices on the way that will enable field reading of that rapid reading component. And then we have the CSI-based, if you've watched it once, you know what it is, how to forensically authenticate DNA using polymerase chain reaction and sequencing. So, the cost of counterfeiting, let's focus for the moment on the Department of Defense. 2 years ago, General Patrick Gallagher testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee about a singular event that took place at the Missile Defense Agency, and that was the trial launch of a THAAD missile. Well, the launch failed, and it turned out that it failed because there were 800 counterfeit components in the computer that guided that missile. So if you're talking about cyber security, you have to begin to make the connection not just between the software, but between the actual counterfeit devices that carry that malware as may have happened in the case of Siemens in the Stux virus discussion we had a few moments ago, that these counterfeit items are very capable of carrying malware, and the last thing you want is that malware activated in a launched missile. So that single event came at a repair of $2.7 million, which, as I'll show you in a moment, comes as a cost to the prime contractor. Some estimates are that 15% of the DoD inventory is counterfeit. Other estimates are 30% of the DoD inventory is counterfeit. Kind of mind-boggling when you really stop to think about it. You think that the job that these electronics have to do in protecting our warfighters. So we've been involved in protecting semiconductors with the Department of Defense for the last couple of years. And we mark microchips and semiconductors with unique DNA markers that symbolize the manufacturer so that they can be authenticated as genuine. And if you're a fan of Jurassic Park, you remember that the DNA was stabilized in amber. And amber truly works in stabilizing DNA sometimes for 100,000 years. And we mimic some of those paleontological discoveries in our own IP. And that's certainly true in the epoxy in which we embed our DNA. So we have marked components by putting DNA into mil-spec epoxy. We've put it into the extruded plastic. We've used plasma physical methods to actually activate the surface and then bind the DNA to a variety of substrates. We have engineered the DNA so that it has a reactive component and we can target a specific ligand, as in cotton or wool or in currency. And we have used laser etching as a means of inducing plasma, which then activates the surface to which the DNA will bind. Our business model is quite simple. We look at any industry vertical, and this is for cash in transit, which I'll tell you a little bit about shortly. But we sell into the bottom of the stakeholder tree. So all those involved, we try to get our DNA into so that the DNA spreads throughout that industry vertical. Then we go to the pain points, and at the pain points where they either suffer loss or exposure to counterfeits, we offer them authentication programs. We talk to the influencers like governments, like insurance companies, and ultimately develop a best practice model where hopefully the influencers look to mandate DNA marking as a policy, and we've been successful in doing exactly that in a number of situations. So in 2012, the Defense Logistics Agency required our DNA as a means of validating the sale of a particular class of semiconductor called FSC 5962 to the Defense Logistics Agency. So in other words, you cannot sell a semiconductor without our mark. Since that time, and as of just recently, over 1,500 awards have been placed to companies that must DNA mark in order to supply DoD. The 2012 National Defense Authorization Act contained an act within it that placed very squarely the blame for counterfeits on the prime contractors. We heard earlier this morning the critical role that prime contractors play in the success of a technology-based company. Well, we are already involved with the prime contractors because of their exposure to the counterfeit issue and the fact that we are the only DoD-approved method for detecting counterfeits using our DNA system. We've recently signed an enterprise-wide agreement with one of the 4 top contractors in the U.S., who can't be named. In terms of stability, because our DNA would be going up on electronic components to outer space and back and subject to all kinds of conditions, we've had to pass stability testing that many scientists might not have imagined possible for DNA some time ago. Long extended periods of high heat, for example, 175 degrees centigrade, roughly the temperature you would cook a turkey at, for 1,000 hours. The turkey would not be in good shape by then, but our DNA is. We've been exposed to all manner of X-rays, rapid changes in temperatures, environments of high salinity, of high caustic gas. We've been exposed to the highest levels of neutron bombardment and a variety of other conditions, and in every case, passed with flying colors. We also passed the DoD's Red Team Challenge, and that was where Battelle and essentially the national laboratories were given a year to knock off or defeat our technology. In the course of that year, they developed 200 submissions, which they thought would come close. We weren't allowed to see them. They were all submitted to us at one time when we had a cluster of kernels in the laboratory with us. As soon as we opened them, we authenticated them, and we were able to show within just an hour or two that all of them were counterfeit, and that is what led to the requirement for DNA marking. And as you can see, it can be easily screened with a laser. From the microchip is a swab that's been used to swab a microchip and then detect the DNA with a simple laser. With that system up and working now for the last 2 years within DLA, we have 30 contracts signed within the manufacturers of semiconductors and their distributors. We have contracts signed with the prime contractors. We're now beginning to contemplate the diversification, cloning that experience to other federal supply classes. And in fact, DLA is doing the same. And having recently announced 5 new FSCs as part of their intended agenda for DNA marking. Now, to give you an example of another category, completely different, of our effectiveness, is the use of signature DNA in preventing ATM crimes and crimes against cash in transit, against the Brinks, the Lumas, the suppliers who move cash from institution to institution. And we protect over 4,000 ATM cassettes throughout Europe, mostly in the UK and Sweden, 1,500 cash in transit boxes, and we have been involved now in over 150 cases. Of those 150 cases, 74 have gone to trial, and we have won 74 convictions. So we have a 100% authentication record, and we have some of the highest sentencing rates because of the strength of that evidence. And for our performance, Parliament gave us an award which has never before been given to a non-policeman, never mind to an American company. We have been involved in protecting tough crime boroughs within London, and now the trend is spreading across Europe by protecting all of the assets, high-value assets or high-risk assets within the home. And the police have been doing that with us. We maintain the database. Something gets stolen, recovered, they check the database, they check the mark, we authenticate the mark, verify that it belongs to a particular homeowner. The evidence is used to convict, and it's also used to repatriate the goods. That's been, our cash in transit business is now expanded into Poland. We also have devices to stop crimes dead in the middle. One is a fog-based device that will fill a room even as large as this And you know the European Union, there's harmonization rules, so you must fill the room in 5 seconds to the point where visibility is limited to 20 centimeters. That's the distance usually to your wrist, which means if you have a gun, you can't see it, difficult to use it. If you can't see your wrist, you can't see your feet, difficult to use those too. And it is an incredible deterrent to crime rate. I should point out that the return on investment for our cash in transit customers in 1 year was a 55% drop in attack rate from a crime rate of 1,000 of these crimes in London alone, and a 77% drop in cash losses from a loss rate of $40 million per year. So very, very effective. And in effect, the cost to those customers was the cost of a single crime. So more than 100 to 1 return, very, very quickly. So we have devices that catch criminals caught in the act. We protect copper against theft throughout really the world now, with some in the US, British Rail, Swedish Power Supply. We were just written up in the Wall Street Journal for protecting the textile industry. The textile industry is subject to an enormous amount of counterfeiting because, in our wisdom, the US has exported most of the services in textiles to those locations where counterfeiting takes place most reliably. So we grow a superb quality cotton called Gila in the United States, ship 5 boatloads of it to Asia, and 10 boatloads of finished product come back. What's wrong with the math there? So what we've done now is mark those fibers. We just marked 55 million kilograms of DNA fibers in the raw just before they were ginned, and are following them throughout the supply chain, from spinning, weaving, to the production of finished goods all the way to the retail side. We can protect virtually every component of the supply chain, from the farmer to trade agreements, to the retailer as well. We're doing it not just for cotton, but for wool and for synthetic textiles. So a very broad capability. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.